Hello, and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Bear. We have been studying about and reading about the fashion industry, the past to the present, and really looking at how it has changed over the years, really studying the idea of how did the fashion industry become the fashion industry at all, and how did all of that kind of come to be. And so we've been reading about different textile industries and the working conditions of some of those. And the last time that we met, we went over some new vocabulary that hopefully will help you throughout the rest of these texts that we're going to be reading for this research unit. So before we get too involved, I want to remind you this is a Common Lit 360 curriculum. This is their Unit 4 called the Fashion Industry Past to Present. Now, I do want to take a second and kind of do a little plug for Common Lit. Common Lit has what we call high quality instructional materials. The text that they choose for their curriculum is at the proper level for the particular grade that whatever it is that you teach. And this particular one is at the 10th grade level, exactly where it needs to be to meet the requirements for the Mississippi Department of Education. And so I just kind of want to let you know that if your district or your school is looking to adopt a new curriculum, maybe you're looking at textbooks, consider the 360 curriculum. So they do have the free account that a lot of teachers do utilize, but in their paid version, there are summative assessments, there are additional resources available that are phenomenal resources for any school, any district, and it's like flawless. Like you can go in and you can differentiate these lessons however it is that they need to be done. So that's all I'm going to say about Common Lit for now, but just kind of think about the Common Lit curriculum because it is a great curriculum for any school to use. So what is our research question? That's one of the things that I kind of hinted at the beginning of this lesson, is that this is a research unit, and our research question is, Francis Cabot Lowell had a utopian vision for a factory that would make profits for owners while also improving the lives of the workers. What was his vision? And then to what extent has his vision been realized since its inception? And we have been reading various texts so that we can answer this question. We have note catchers, we have all these different resources for you to keep up with the information to answer this question at the end. Today, we are going to read The Female Workers of Lowell. So this essay casts mill life in a negative light. It focuses on the damage to the workers' health. As you read, you will determine the author's point of view or purpose. And so it's a little bit different than some of the other texts that we've read. But also similar, because we have read texts where people wrote in anonymously to some of these magazines. So we have read a couple of articles there. So just kind of think about that research question as we read the article and just kind of follow along. So let's dig in. What are we going to learn today? Today we're going to read The Female Workers of Lowell. It's an article from The Harbinger, which was a magazine from the day. The Harbinger was a weekly magazine written and published by residents of Brook Farm. That was a community in Massachusetts. And so you see an example of that on your screen of what that magazine actually looked like. Founded in 1840, Brook Farm was a utopian socialist experiment. So what does that mean? So utopianism is the attempt to imagine or create a perfect society. In 19th century America, some people reacted to industrialization by trying to create perfect farm communities like Brook Farm. Socialist societies practice shared ownership of the means of production, in this case, the farm. The goal is to create a more equal society. So, how does that work? Or does it work? And we're going to learn about that today in this article. So, Brook Farm founder, Reverend George Ripley, wrote, "We are striving to establish a mode of life which shall combine the enchantments of poetry with the facts of daily experience." Kind of an interesting quote there that might be something that you consider when you are writing your essay. So just kind of keep that in mind. So what did that look like for the people who lived in Brook Farm? So each member of Brook Farm owned an equal share of the farm. They worked there and they received an equal share of its profits. So by publishing the Harbinger, the residents of Brook Farm hoped to share their ideas and advance this idea of social and political progress. So now I want you to think about all of that, and I want you to, before you raise your hand, I want you to think about how do you think the residents of Brook Farm would view life at a Lowell mill? So I'm going to take a second and let your teacher call on you and answer that question. Those were some great ideas that you shared out, and some of you are still kind of questioning. You're not sure about this whole idea of a utopian society or even a socialist society, and that's good. So thinking about those ideas and how that would work is really good for your brain to just kind of be thinking about as we look at this idea of this research about Francis Cabot Lowell and this idea of this utopian society, right? Okay, so as we read today, you're going to be analyzing the creator's context and identify some bias. So that's one of the skills that we're going to be focusing on. But remember, when we were talking about primary sources, there are certain questions that we need to ask ourselves, right? Those questions are, who created this artifact? And what do we know about this person? Who is the intended audience for this artifact? And lastly, how did this context most likely affect the content of the artifact? So in addition to the questions that will be in the margins of your text and the questions that you guys will generate yourselves, you need to be thinking about these questions. And I hope that you have those notes somewhere where we talked about this, and then you can keep those notes in the margins of your text. So it is time for us to read now. So I hope that your teacher has printed you a copy of The Female Workers of Lowell and that you are ready to follow along. We will read the first paragraph together, and then I'm going to send you off to read with a partner and then to finish independently. And remember, when we are reading, when you come across a question in the margin, if that question is with a partner reading, then it is okay. It's actually encouraged for you to talk about the question and your responses with your partner. But remember that you are responsible for your own work. So everybody needs to answer the questions regardless of the discussion that happens. When you are reading independently, you are responsible for answering the questions in the margins independently. So, are we ready? Do you have your pencil in your hand? Are we ready to read the first paragraph together? All right, well, let's get started. This article is from Harbinger, a weekly magazine written and published by residents of Brook Farm, a utopian socialist experiment in Massachusetts in the 1840s. Each member of Brook Farm owned an equal share of the farm, worked there, and received an equal share of its profits. According to its masthead, the Harbinger was devoted to social and political progress. So now I want you in the margin, I want you to read the question. Think and share with the rest of your class. What do we know about the writers of Harbinger magazine? Write your answer there before you discuss as a class. Now, I want you to also answer the next question about the audience. Who is the intended audience for this artifact? So I'm gonna let your teacher pause on the screen, but I want you, after you answer that question, discuss. The next section you will read with a partner, and then you will see once you get to paragraph 7, you become independent readers and thinkers. So finish reading this article, and then we'll come back together and I will give you your next instructions. Great job. I loved the energy that went into when you guys had to shift from your partner read to your independent read. You wanted to keep reading with your partner, and that's fun. But you do need to be reading these independently when we get to those independent sections. Some of you were taking really good notes in your margins. Others of you are still unsure about what you want to write, and that's okay. Either way that you do this is whatever works for you, as long as you're thinking about what's going to be going into your research essay. So now I need you to independently answer the text-dependent questions at the end of your text. Great job. Now, I know that you guys know that these questions are written very similarly to the way your state test or your state assessment questions are written. And so these will help prepare you for that end of the year state assessment, that English 2 state test that's such a big monster. But you are all prepared for it because you have done so well answering these questions. Now it is time to talk about what you've learned. There are some discussion questions that you will answer with a partner. So we're going to pause here so that you can do that. Fantastic job. Now it is time to look at the notes that you've kept, look back at that research question, and I want you to kind of fill in that research note-taking graphic organizer for the female workers of Lowell. Great job. You guys did such a fantastic job. That is all that I have for you today. Until next time, happy learning.